The purpose of this lecture, which is the title is Profit, Loss, and Discovery. Profit, Loss, and Discovery. And the purpose of the lecture is to illuminate how the market process generates improvements in the human condition through facilitating the discovery of ever better ways of achieving human satisfactions. So the claim is that the market process, with the important help of profit and loss, serves to help human beings discover the best ways, the best new ways of achieving human satisfactions. It focuses in particular on the role of profit and loss in directing human activities in creative, socially useful directions. Now, profit and loss are calculated in terms of prices. And so I want to start with this observation. And if you want to challenge me on this, I would just ask you to go to any good microeconomics textbook and read the description of that. But one of the basic principles of economics is that market prices that are determined in the free play of the bidding of buyers and sellers in a market, do a very good job of indicating the actual value of one more unit of that good in a society. The economists among you might want me to add in here this caret, do a good job of indicating the marginal value. That is the value of one more unit of whatever it is that's being priced. And this is very important to a lot of what I'll be saying, so I want that just on the board to begin with. Market prices that are generated out of this bidding of different people who compete against one another, and one company offering a slightly higher price than the next because of the urgency of its need, will indicate how urgently the demanders need something. And on the cost side, on the supply side, the competition among the sellers will indicate how cheaply they can make it and the minimum value for which they can sell it. So to a first approximation, a very robust first approximation, market prices indicate the value that day of one more of whatever it is. Okay? And because that's sort of fundamental to much of what I'm saying, I just thought we ought to get that little micro review in there. Now, the title of the talk is Profit, Loss, and Discovery. There are two senses of discovery that I want to deal with. We'll deal with the first one much more quickly and the second one at much more length because it's more fun. The first sense of discovery I want to focus on is the discovery of what to do with what we have. What is the best use of the resources that we have? And this is, again, very commonplace in micro. Those of you who've taken micro are familiar with this. This is the matter of discovering how to make the best use of scarce resources, okay? And for a simple example, suppose you're a farmer and you have land that's good for growing root crops like beets and carrots and potatoes and so on. And you need to determine somehow at the beginning of a planting season what to produce. Well, profit and loss, or prospective profit and loss, tend to tell you. And to take a very simple example, suppose you believed, and of course it's never certain, we live in a very uncertain world, but in your professional judgment as an experienced farmer, you believed that the price of potatoes at the end of the season was going to be about $6 per pound. And you believed it would probably cost you about $5 per pound to produce the potatoes. Okay? If it works out that way, then you'd have a profit per pound on potatoes of $1 a pound. Suppose your expectation is that carrots, which for some reason are selling at higher prices, you expect that carrots are going to fetch $10 per pound. But it's going to be more costly to produce the carrots for reasons I'm just making up as I go along. And you figure it'll take you, say, $7 per pound to produce the carrots. Not parrots, carrots. So, and again, making the simplifying assumption that you expect to be able to produce the same quantities of each. What is this prospective profit and loss telling you? What should you produce in order to make the best use of this valuable, scarce resource of this fertile land for growing the crops? What should you grow, potatoes or carrots this year? carrots because the profit would be greater. That is, the difference between the cost of producing something and the benefit to the buyers is going to be greater. So we're going to get more bang for the buck, so to speak, because the prospective profit is $3 per pound rather than just $1 per pound. And that's about all I want to do with that first very significant sense of discovery of the market process. Through the prospective profit and loss, people discover, and sometimes by feedback also. Suppose at the end of the season you realize you'd made a bad mistake. You planted carrots, but the cost was higher than you expected and the price was lower and you made a loss. Well, that goes into your experience, and the next year you don't make such high estimates of your profit on carrots. And so in general, in that way, through the feedback of profit or loss experienced, through the expectation of profit or loss to be realized, business people are guided in what to do with their stuff. They discover through the market process. The profit and loss help us discover what use to make of our resources. And it's a profoundly important process in society. And that's all I have to say about that first very important sense of discovery through profit and loss, because the second sense of discovery is one that is less in your textbooks. Those of you who've taken micro, all this is perfectly familiar, right? The second sense of it is much more rare. It's not discussed so much, partly because of the pathology of the perfect competition model. And that is discovery of what to do for the first time. Discovery of new products, of new processes for producing those products. And it's unclear at any point in human history what new products should be produced or what new processes are really going to turn out to be economical. And so we need a discovery process to find out, to sift through all the various possibilities and discover the best new things to do. And profit and loss help us with that. Now, this is a process that the great Austrian economist Joseph Schumpeter called the process of creative destruction. It's a great term that you ought to get in your notes. Creative destruction. Joseph Schumpeter, in his wonderful book, Capitalism, Socialism, and Democracy, I think that's where it was, talked about the gales of creative destruction that blow across the economic landscape and destroy old ways of doing things, but in their place create a new and better way of doing things that will supplant the old. And we shouldn't minimize either part of this. The destruction can be very significant, can be very painful to people who have a lot invested either in their human capital or physical capital in old ways of production, and it does get destroyed. But on the whole, it's good for society because in its place something new gets created. Some examples. First of all, consider the way we communicate, our telecommunications. "50 years ago, if you had wanted to call Australia on the telephone, could you do it? I think you could do it in 1956, right? I think so. What physical medium would have carried the signal of your voice across the Pacific Ocean? Phone wire made out of copper, probably, right? Tons and tons of copper ripped out of Montana mountainsides and laid at great expense across the ocean. Did you get a good quality telephone conversation between here and Australia in 1956? No, there were clicks and delays and a bad signal and so on. It's not too many years ago in this room that at this point in this lecture I'd say, suppose we needed to call Australia now, how would we do it? And what I had in mind was microwave communications from the payphone downstairs. But probably as we sit here today, I would guess that more than half of us in this room could flip open a little device and call Australia from where we sit right now without even going down to the payphone. Totally cool thing. What would carry the signal of our voice? Well, I don't even know the physics of a cell phone. I think it's radio waves of some kind, right? Some radio waves to some nearby cell tower. Then it gets bounced up to a microwave satellite, just a few pounds of high-tech equipment orbiting the Earth in geosynchronous orbit. Or maybe a fiber optic cable also laid across the Pacific, but that can take like 1,000 times more telephone calls than the copper cable can. So what you have here is creative destruction of the old methods of carrying a voice signal and replacement with new. Consider also how we light our buildings. 100 years ago, what would the typical family, 100 years ago? No, how far back do I have to go? 200 years ago. We'll go back to 1850. How did the wealthy people light their houses? With oil. Oil made from whales, right? And a huge industry was built around this, the whaling industry. Much of the New England coast of the United States was dependent on whaling. And there was some big-time creative destruction with the development of what that replaced oil? Not electricity yet. Not gas yet. Kerosene, right? Kerosene refined from petroleum. That's what made John D. Rockefeller his initial big money, was kerosene, not gasoline. Because kerosene burned cleaner, it was cheaper, it was better to go in the lamps. Then, of course, we had electric light and so on. And up to last month at this point in this lecture, I would say, and what will replace electric lighting, you know, incandescent lighting and fluorescent lighting, I'll be very interested to find out. Surely it'll come along. But 2 days ago in the Wall Street Journal, I read about what apparently will be what replaces incandescent and fluorescent lighting. And that is, anybody guess? Light-emitting diodes, the LEDs like on the flat screens. Apparently, there's all sorts of research into using it for lighting buildings. It's very economical and clean, and that's a nice quality of light. So the creative destruction goes on. As this gets developed, it could be we'd see the end of light bulbs. All the machinery that makes that would be destroyed in a very creative way because we'd be substituting something better. Cleaner, cheaper, more economical, easier to use, and so on. So that's this process of creative destruction that you have in the marketplace. Now, before I go on with this, I want to ask you to stop and just take stock of how unbelievably wealthy we are in our time and place, the kinds of things that we enjoy that most human beings, through most of human history, could not even have imagined. I've told some of you I really enjoy sailing. Board sailing, you know, on a light surfboard kind of thing with a sail. You know, it requires high-tech materials. It's tremendous good fun, and it just wasn't possible not too long ago. Here on my cards from some years ago, it says Mozart on CD. Well, that's creative destruction. Who uses CDs anymore? You know, we put them on the iPod instead. It's better. Air conditioning, usually at this time of year in New Jersey, it's muggy and hot and awful outside, and we are sitting here happily in the air conditioning. The weather is very unusual. Air conditioning is a nice thing, huh? So we all enjoy pretty much. When the snow flies in the winter, we have fresh grapes that are flown in from Chile. All sorts of wonderful things. How did the Western economy get so productive to produce so many things at so little cost? This is sort of what we're getting at, and I think it's important that we stop and appreciate the marvel of the productivity of market economies. It really is mind-blowing when you think of it. So why is it so creative? What guides the creativity in socially useful directions? Now, first, I want to go over some economic building blocks. Did that come on? Next. How about that? I want you to consider these questions for a couple of minutes and talk to the person next to you. I'll give you maybe 60 seconds. How would you answer each of these questions? You're on your own here just to talk to one another for about a minute. Yoo-hoo! Thank you. I know it's all week long we're interrupting good discussions. Here's another time. Now, I'm not going to ask you for your feedback on that now. I just wanted you to consider, and I'll come to the answers that I would suggest on each of them as we go along here with what's coming up right now. Now, what determines the value of a product? This is a bit of a reprise from what Frank Stevenson was saying yesterday. What determines something's value? For a long time, up until 1870, even the best trained economists thought that labor, the amount of labor that went into something, determined its value. This was the labor theory of value. And one of my great heroes, Adam Smith, first propounded it in chapter 5 of his great book, The Wealth of Nations. Karl Marx picked it up and spun it into the tragically wrong system of Marxism. So the labor theory of value was mistaken. Nevertheless, and it's accepted as mistaken in all of economics now. Nevertheless, there's this residue of it in a lot of people's attitudes about the market, about exchange, about profit and loss. And so I think we should deal with that. I can skip the portion of the talk that talks about the subjective nature of value, because Frank covered it yesterday and you're familiar with it. Value is determined by the opinions, the values of the valuer. But now there are strong implications for the difference between this labor theory of value, which is now discredited and rejected in economics, and the subjective theory of value. And I want to go over some of those now. There are implications for how people understand exchange, how they understand profit, which is where we're focused, and how they understand market relationships in general. If you hold on to the labor theory of value, which by implication suggests that things have an objective value, not a subjective, but an objective value. If the value of this bottle of water is determined by the labor that went into producing it overall, then the value of this bottle of water is the value of that labor. Well, what that means is if you pay more than that, then you got ripped off. And if you get away somehow with paying the producer less, then the producer gets ripped off. So somebody or other always gets ripped off in any exchange, unless it's a perfect, neither improves their position at all because the money paid is exactly equal to the value received. So what the implication of that then is that exchange is a zero-sum game. Somebody wins, somebody else loses. The implication for profit, and I'm going to expand on this further, is that profit is a case of the workers losing in the exchange. Because profit is the difference between the value of something produced, which of course is determined by the labor that went into it, and oversimplifying a little bit, but not in any significant and important way, the wages paid to the workers who put the value in there. And what that means is market relationships are a matter of exploitation. The owners, the capitalists, are exploiting the workers because the workers are the source of value and they don't get paid that whole value. To give you a simple example to capture the flavor of Marxism that still in a lot of sometimes incoherent ways I think a lot of people believe. Suppose you guys are all the workers in a factory and I'm the capitalist that owns the factory. Suppose we're making tractors, and in the course of a year, we produce tractors, you produce tractors worth $1 million. And my total wage bill paying you is $900,000. You created the $1 million worth of value in the tractors. I only paid you $900,000. I walk away with a $100,000 profit. So I have profited at your expense. I have exploited you. All right, that's the sort of quick and dirty, that's Marxism, the problems with capitalism. And sincere Marxists really believe that people are being injured by market exchange. They're being wronged, and it's a very important thing to grapple with. But that is mistaken. I try not to use too much PowerPoint, but every once in a while there's some things that I really like this. Now you can do that. This labor theory of value is rejected. The subjective theory of value is what we want to go with. Now, in the subjective theory of value, as Frank was pointing out, you have positive sum economic relationships where both sides win because each party to an exchange gets that thing which they valued more than the other. And so in consequence, I'll spend more time on this. Profit, come on, little machine. Profit is the consequence of new value created. And loss is a consequence of value destroyed. I'll spend some time on this in just a moment. But sort of to complete the grid, market relationships in the subjective theory of value are generally relationships of mutual benefit, or in the biological metaphor, symbiosis, in which both parties to the relationship benefit. Okay? Now, I want to focus in on profit and loss. What we mean by profit and loss, how we understand them in the subjective theory of value. Now, first of all, I want to urge you, and I'd put this in your notes if you're taking notes, always keep them together. Think of profit and loss. Think of the profit and loss system. Don't think of businesses making profits. Most businesses don't make profits. Most businesses, 60% of the businesses opened fail within the first 5 years. They make losses and go under. It's hard to make profits. If it were easier, Baetjer might try to be an entrepreneur, but he's afraid he wouldn't cut it. So I'm just working a salaried job. It's safe, and I'm not trying to take the risk of making profit and risk losses. So keep profit and loss together. Now, profit and loss are defined how? What do we mean by profit and loss? Give me a definition. It's the difference of what two magnitudes? Is it there in my notes? Oh, okay, all right. I didn't know. Yeah, the difference between yield and cost. The accountants among you will say the difference between total revenue and total cost. And that's perfectly fine for most purposes. It's a little bit more general to understand profit as the difference between yield. That is, all the benefits, not just the money revenue. For example, I would say that this is a very profitable week for me teaching here, and the money is less than half of the yield, because I have so much fun. It's just, this is a really fun occasion for me. And in general, I think you will recognize that the word profit can be used in a very general way. For example, would any of you say perhaps that you have had one or two unprofitable romantic relationships? The yield, the benefit, and the good times, and the good feeling, and the intimacy, and the interaction just wasn't worth the hassles and so on, okay? That's unprofitable. You made a loss in that relationship. I'm sorry. And we're always looking for the very profitable relationships in which the yield, not in any financial sense, but in it's one of the best things in life, right? All these good feelings that are greater than the cost. Fortunately, so far, especially since this is being filmed, in my relationship with my wife, where I'm way profit. Profit all the way. And all right, let's see, focus here. So profit is yield minus cost. Now, the implication of that, then, is that profit-making is a very creative act. It's an act of creating new value. Because in order to make a profit, the yield has got to be greater than the cost. Now, in sort of everyday business terms, what determines the yield? That is, how much a business gets paid for its product. The yield is an indicator of, I'll do this in a different color, is an indicator of the value to consumers, right? It's not a perfect indicator. In fact, it's almost always smaller than the value to consumers, because some consumers get a nice consumer surplus and think they get a great bargain. But it's a good indicator of the value to consumers. What do we mean by the cost of production? Well, it's the value of the next best use of all the different resources that were needed to produce the item. Let's take an example. Does any of you have your own business at this point? Or plan a business? Mewish, what is it? Can you tell us quickly about it? Okay, I'm looking for a smaller business. Presumably you don't own this multinational yet? You do own it? Way to go, good for you. Okay, so now, all right, we need to hear this. Hey, bravo, bravo. What do? You
basically take orders from all around the world, and then the basic factory, the unit itself is set up in Asia. So once the orders go through, we provide them with whatever.
All right, and what's your product? Surgical equipment. Okay, let's run with that. To produce surgical equipment, Mewish has got to use different things. What are some of the inputs that she must use? I'm thinking scalpels, there's got to be a certain amount of steel, right? The steel that goes into a scalpel, some of these things. The labor that goes into producing them. The building, which could be used doing something else. Then the rent on the building, the electricity. So what we mean by the cost of production is the value of all the inputs in their next best use. That's the economic definition of cost, okay? So the cost of producing these things that she produces is that the steel cannot be used for something else. The labor is not used for something else. That's the cost. So she takes, are you making profit? Atta girl, good for you, okay. She's making a good profit. What that means is she takes resources of steel and labor and electricity and building space and so on that in their best alternative uses are worth, make up some round numbers, let's say $100,000 a year, and transforms them into goods that consumers value at, say, $120,000 a year. If she does that, she's made a profit of $20,000 per year, and that's a consequence of having created at least $20,000 worth of new value for people. See what I'm saying? If she makes losses, by contrast, you know, she takes these, this building could be used for something else, the labor could be used for something else, you know, that you and I value at a certain, you know, so say that you and I value at $100,000, and she transforms it, we'll put it in red to indicate that the loss, she transforms it into products that are only worth, say, $70,000 to us. It's a kind of a tragedy, kind of a human tragedy. These resources that in their next best use were worth $100,000 have now been put to work producing something worth only $70,000? What a damn shame. Right? That's losses. On this view, then, question for you to consider amongst yourselves. I'll give you 30 seconds with the person next to you. How much profit is too much profit? That fourth question on my list. How much profit is too much? I'm trying to just put it in terms of numbers here. In terms of numbers, how much, at what point do we get too much profit? Astrid? There can't be too much profit on this view. Indeed, if one of you had Harry Potter's capabilities, and you could produce this $70,000 worth of value with just a wave of the wand and the zero cost, you'd make more profit, you'd make $70,000. That would be great because you wouldn't have used up any of these valuable resources that have alternative uses, right? The more profit, if it's made in honest market exchange, the better. Because what it means is that more value has been created for consumers. Now, if there aren't some yes, but questions that show up on the stickies at the end of this lecture, at this point, I'm going to be very disappointed. But I'm going to go on for now, okay? This notion that maximizing profit, when it's profit in the economic sense of profit gained in free, uncoerced activity, is always socially useful. Because it means achieving the greatest value from resources. And I want to expand on this for just a moment. Even nonprofit organizations, in this sense, should always strive to maximize their profit. That is, maximize the difference between the yield, the benefit in terms of what they're trying to achieve, and the cost of doing so. For example, some of you may have seen in my bio that for quite a number of years now, I've been working on the board of Children's Scholarship Fund Baltimore. It's a nonprofit that raises private money to give partial scholarships to low-income Baltimore City families who are desperate to get their children out of the awful public schools there and send them to the Catholic schools or other independent schools in the city. We have tremendous demand for our product, a long waiting list, so think about that. What is the yield to us? What's the yield, the benefit? The satisfaction of getting more families out of the public schools for whom the public schools are not succeeding for their kids, and getting the kids into a better school. So we want the maximum benefit to the children of Baltimore. The cost is the money we spend on it, which could be used elsewhere. So, for example, one of the kinds of decisions we made during our history, which really is, in a sense, a decision about how to make the enterprise most profitable, was, should we try to take our kids all the way through 12th grade and thereby take fewer kids that far, or cut off the scholarships at 8th grade so that we could give more children a better start? It's the question of, given the same cost, the same amount of money spent, what will be the greater yield for Baltimore City and our families? What we decided was cut them off at 8th grade and give more children a start, and we don't know if it's the right decision or not. Again, the world is uncertain. We're not sure that it was the right decision, but we've made it and we'll go with it, and it might be that it would have been more profitable to do otherwise. We won't find out. One other point on a piece of this. Many socialist commentators, writers, and so on, have criticized profit and said that in socialism, we'll have production for use and not for profit. The implication somehow that in socialism, we won't have profit any longer, and that'll be a good thing. But on this view of things, even a socialist government that is trying to do the best it can for the people must strive to maximize profit. That is, get the best possible yield out of the resources that it uses. So it's really an error to suggest that in socialism you don't have to worry about profit. Baloney. The socialist government, if it conscientiously wants to benefit the people, had better work its butt off to maximize profit. Get the best yield in terms of housing and education and schooling and food and clothing for its people, given the cost. Okay? So it's almost inevitable in human life that we must try to maximize profit, understood this way, in order that we might live better. All right, now, what time? I think I have time for this. I want to illustrate, before leaving this idea, the nature of profit and loss, but also to illustrate how difficult it can be to make profits, how easy it can be to make losses, and how large they can be. Have any of you ever heard of a company called Iridium? Iridium, it's a company. Big corporation, Iridium. Anybody? They're gone now. But they were a hot company, and I followed their progress through many front page stories in the Wall Street Journal. Here's the quick story of Iridium. And I think a lot of this is apocryphal, but it's a fun way to tell the story, and it gets the majority of it. The wife of a Motorola executive, one of the main investors in Iridium was Motorola, which makes some of our cell phones and so on. The wife of a Motorola executive was vacationing in the Bahamas and wanted to call her daughter in Chicago. And she had a very difficult time getting a connection from the beach in the Bahamas to Chicago. This is a number of years ago. And she comes home to her husband that night and swears something. Says, "God damn it, can't you techies figure out a way for me to call my daughter from the beach?" And this guy thought a while, and he said, "We could do that. We could do that." And he gets more excited, "We could do that." So they create a satellite phone system. They put 66 satellites into low Earth orbit, not the 23,000 miles out there geosynchronous stuff, just, a couple, 20, 50, I don't know, a few miles up. 66 satellites in low Earth orbit. And the idea was, on the beach there in the Bahamas, you get out your satellite phone, you make a call, and it goes directly up to a satellite, which then kicks the signal around to the satellite which happens to be closest over Chicago, beams it down to a tower there in Chicago, and goes along the landline to the daughter at her apartment. Well, they conceived this phone system, and they built it. And it took between $5 and $7 billion to build this system. The cost, which I followed with fascination in the Wall Street Journal, included costs of diplomacy. Because if this thing is going to work and be a worldwide system, they need to negotiate with the governments of all the countries that are going to be underneath the satellites at any point, where they need to build the towers. So it's the cost of building the towers, the cost of all the programming for the software in the satellites, the cost of the rocketry to put the satellites into orbit, all that sort of stuff. $5 to $7 billion. And then some time went by, and I just didn't hear anything about Iridium. I wondered, what had happened. And then looking at my Yahoo News on March 15th of the year 2000, I saw this headline: Iridium satellites to burn in debacle. What? And I read this: Iridium, a U.S. satellite telephone company operating under bankruptcy protection, I didn't even know they were bankrupt, is on the verge of one of the most spectacular business flameouts ever, literally set to burn up billions of dollars worth of Earth-orbiting assets. Barring a last-minute arrival of a qualified buyer, the company plans to begin deorbiting the 66 satellites that make up the world's first low-orbit system for wireless telephone service. They made some business misjudgments. they couldn't build the handsets light enough to appeal to people. People described them as bricks. The cost got down to $3,000, and of course they would have gotten it down lower, but they couldn't get it down low enough fast enough. They didn't work very well in buildings. And they didn't anticipate what alternative technology? Reach into your purse. Cell phones. They just didn't anticipate the speed with which cell phone towers would go up. I bet now at that same beach in the Bahamas, you could flip open your phone and get a Sprint connection, a Singular connection, a Verizon connection, no problem. Because that has taken off. But they didn't anticipate it right. So they made $5 to $7 billion worth of losses. They only made a few $1 million. And they spent $5 to $7 billion. That's a serious loss. The world is an uncertain place. We don't know what technologies to try or what to invest in. Some of you, I trust, will someday try to do your own investing. I never do. I have enough knowledge of the complexity of the economy. I don't think I'm competent. So I hire specialists to invest for me. All right. This next portion of the talk goes pretty quickly, and that's just to take a moment to think about the meaning of entrepreneurship and entrepreneurs. It's an important part of the vocabulary. The role of profit seeker in the economy is the entrepreneur. Motorola here was being the entrepreneur, investing in this, getting this thing going, promoting Iridium, trying to make this go. Meiwish, if it's her own company, is the entrepreneur for her company, the one who assembles the investors and the workers and the materials and tries to get this thing to market and successful. What are just with one another now, and I only mean to take, say, 2 minutes on this in total, what are the characteristics of a good and successful entrepreneur? I have 3 or 4 in mind. You'll come up with more. Take 30 seconds. A good entrepreneur has what capabilities? Okay, let me hear from you. Entrepreneurship, what are the capabilities?
Risk takers.
Risk-taking. Entrepreneurs. Actually, the best work on entrepreneurship is by Professor Israel Kirzner of New York University, and he says, no, they don't take any risks. The pure entrepreneur gets somebody else to risk his money. So that depends on your definition. Let's definitely put it up here. Entrepreneurs, by most understandings, engage in risk-taking. What else? What capabilities must a successful entrepreneur have? Lahua? They have to be able to spot a niche. That's a great word. This is Dr. Kirzner's word, perception, the ability to spot the niche. They need to be perceptive, to perceive what could work that hasn't been tried before. Ben? Attaboy, good for you. Adaptation, because they probably aren't going to get it right the first time. Perceptive, adaptable. What's this vowel in adaptable? I? That's right that way? Adaptable? Okay, adaptable. Those are, Tiffany? Decisive, yeah. You can't wait too long. You gotta go ahead and try things. I think that covers what I had in mind, but let's hear some, Tamara? Yeah, they gotta be persuasive and able to market things. Foresighted, yes, that's another aspect of this perception. Luis?
Well, they make consumers happy. That's the most important.
But that's because of these. Yeah, that's fine. But they can only do it if they are adequately risk-taking, perceptive, adaptable, decisive, and so on. That's about all I had. All I wanted to significantly different. Is it? Pardon me? Understanding of different fields. Yeah, they generally need to have some range of knowledge. All right, so that, and I just would say, finishing this short bit on entrepreneurs, in the economics in which I'm trained, the entrepreneur is the hero. Hero is too strong. But the entrepreneur is the driving force, the one who takes the risks or does the legwork to assemble investors and workers and buildings and try these new products, some of which please us very much. Now, glasses are here. The last main portion of the lecture now we get to, and that is on the role of profit and loss in the economy. the role of profit and loss in the economy. The function of profit and loss arises out of a couple of facts about the world. First of all, the world is uncertain. Ask the guys who invested in Motorola. One of my colleagues at Towson University had bought a lot of Iridium stock. And I talked to him about it, and he could hardly even talk about it. He was so upset. The world is uncertain. It's unpredictable. It's ever-changing. And that means profits are never assured. Always depend on an uncertain future. And in a very real sense, human beings are always very ignorant about what to do today so as to make the world a better place tomorrow and make some profits. And I have for you some somewhat entertaining quotations that captures this. And I can send you the link if you want to email me after the seminar, and I can send you this. Here are some of my favorites. This is from Popular Mechanics magazine, forecasting the relentless march of science in 1949. Quote, "Computers in the future may weigh no more than 1.5 tons. And they're probably talking about computers with less processing power than is now in our cell phones. Another one, similar, from 1943, 6 years earlier. Thomas Watson, chairman of IBM. "I think there is a world market for maybe 5 computers." Now, of course, he's thinking at the very high prices of the time. There are a number of these are from computers. Ken Olsen, this is much later, 1977. Ken Olsen, president, chairman, and founder of Digital Equipment Corp. in 1977, is quoted as saying, "There is no reason anyone would want a computer in their home." Think of the magnitude of entrepreneurial error that represents. Just a short time before the boys at Apple came up with the Apple II, he's the head of a computer company. He says, "No one would want a home computer. Be serious." Whoops, he made a mistake. Western Union, the dominant telecommunications company, 1876, quote, "This telephone has too many shortcomings to be seriously considered as a means of communication." So they didn't build it, someone else did. This is one of my very favorites. This is a Yale University management professor in response to Fred Smith's paper proposing reliable overnight delivery service. What company did Fred Smith found? FedEx. This is I don't have the year. Sorry, I don't have the year. But this is when Fred Smith was management in business school at Yale, I think. And so his professor reads the description of FedEx, and he writes, "The concept is interesting and well-formed, but in order to earn better than a C, the idea must be feasible."
Oh my God.
We professors know better than you guys, after all. You suppose that guy ever looks at himself in the mirror when he's shaving in the morning and says, "You son of a bitch. You saw the FedEx business plan, and you gave it a C. You should have mortgaged the house, been the first investor." 1927, H.M. Warner of Warner Brothers. "Who the hell wants to hear actors talk?" 1929, Irving Fisher, the great Irving Fisher, professor of economics at Yale University. It must have been before the fall of 1929 that he said this, because what happened in the fall of 1929? Stock market crash. "Stocks have reached what looks like a permanently high plateau." And the last one, my favorite one, Bill Gates, 1981. 640K ought to be enough for anybody. Talking about how much memory should the CPU be able to address. How could anyone use more than 640 kilobytes of RAM? Well, what do we have in them now? They routinely delivered with 128 megabytes of RAM. So, you know, these are people in the best position to know, the experts in the field to make predictions, and still they get it wrong. The point is that human beings are always woefully, tragically ignorant about what to do tomorrow to make the world a better place. And we have no way of having certain future knowledge. We need some procedure for figuring it out, some trial and loss procedure. The other part of this that is a serious problem is that the resources for experimentation are scarce. When the guys build Iridium, they're taking resources away from all sorts of other things that might have pleased us better. So we've got a very uncertain world, a real scarcity of material and human resources with which to experiment. So we need some way of sorting out the good ideas from the bad, of figuring out what really is going to satisfy people well. Now, I suggest that in the economy, you have an evolutionary process similar to what you have in biology. All evolution is variation and selection. To be evolution, it's got to have some means of coming up with new trials, more stuff, more things trying their place in either the biological or the economic ecosystem. And then there needs to be some means of selection. In biology, it's natural selection, reproductive success, what's known as survival of the fittest. How would you fill in those two boxes for the economy? Again, talk to the person next to you. I'll give you 30 seconds. What should go there? Melinda and Dan. Say they've got it. What do you say, guys? What goes here?
We said experimentation for source of variation.
Experimentation by whom? In what role in society? By the entrepreneurs. And so the entrepreneurial innovation is society's necessary, indispensable means of trying new things. And the decision-making process, the selection method is what?
The consumer.
Well, it's the consumer's decisions which are going to dictate whether the company makes profit or loss, okay? Profit and loss is society's indispensable feedback system with which we discover what kinds of enterprises really work for people. And in an uncertain world, there doesn't seem to be any available alternative. You could put experts in charge, and they'll say, who the hell wants to hear actors talk? And we won't have talking movies. It'll be Tom Cruise with the piano playing behind as he acts out the silent movies. Or the head of Digital Equipment Corporation saying, there's no home computers. The much vaunted Ministry of International MITI in Japan that was so hyped 15 years ago, 20 years ago, their bureaucracy that was in charge of deciding where investment should go, they told Honda not to produce cars. Now, there are too many car makers. There's no space for Honda in the market. Just stick with motorcycles. You don't want experts making these decisions because they don't know. We need us making the decisions through this distributed process of profit and loss. Let the entrepreneurs try, and then we decide. When they make profit, it's because the consumers have said, we like this at the price. Good job. Here's your reward. And when they make losses, we don't buy. We say, suck it up, boys. I'm sorry. We're not paying for that. You talk to your bank. You got a problem. 3 social functions of profit and loss. First of all, motivate. Give entrepreneurs an incentive to create value for other people. Lots of people prefer more money to less. The lure of profit is very strong. The fear of loss is very strong. And faced with profit or loss, people are motivated to try to come up with something good. I assume that Maywish is motivated to try to think, what other surgical or medical equipment could I come up with that people might want to buy? What do I get rid of, and so on. So that's number 1. Number 2, signaling what to do. As in that first example, the prospective profit and loss tell entrepreneurs how to use their equipment, how to use their resources. It tells Iridium, time to close down now. People don't want your satellite phones. So to communicate, I guess, is the second one. Motivate, profit and loss motivate people to work hard and think hard about what people need. Communicate what people really want. And the third one is more subtle, and that's this, and very significant. In an uncertain world, it's not clear who should be doing what, who should be the entrepreneurs. And this is from the great Austrian economist Ludwig von Mises, who says profit and loss are the instruments by means of which consumers pass the direction of production activities into the hands of those who are best fit to serve them. How does that work? How is it that through profit and loss, consumers pass the direction of production into the hands of those who are best fit to serve them. Stefan? Yeah, they're electing who they want as producers. At least so far, we've elected Bill Gates. You know, we've given him enough reward. He can make decisions about what next gets produced. So profit and loss are the capital, the free capital that a company now has at its disposal to decide, what do we invest in now? And it's a reward from having done well in the past, maybe sometimes by accident or chance, but sometimes by good thinking and creativity and so on. So prices, profit and loss signal to us what to do, and they move the authority to guide production to those who have served us well. I can't remember on the spot now. I do it every time. So motivate, communicate, and I don't remember. I have to do it though. Transfer decision-making power. Okay? Profit and loss transfer decision-making power to those who satisfy us consumers. Right now, before I close, relatively quickly, there's one important matter to attend to. I've made as strong as possible a case as possible as I can today for looking at profit at profit as a good thing, saying the more profit, the better. That I stand by as long as the profit is made in economic exchange, in free, open, uncoerced exchange. Profits can be made in other ways. For example, some of you might want to invest a certain amount of money in housebreaking tools and set off on a career as burglar. It might turn out to be very profitable for you. You might rake in more in silver and paintings and jewelry than you spent on the housebreaking tools. You made a profit. I'm not in favor of that kind of profit because it doesn't respect people's property rights. And people didn't choose to give you their jewelry and silver. So let's look at it this way. Economic profit. There are two kinds of profit. Economic profit made in fair and open economic exchange is made by what Baetjer and others have called the economic means, uncoerced, mutually beneficial exchange. In that sense, entrepreneurs who make profits make money. They don't make the money itself, but they create wealth by keeping the cost of production lower than the value to their consumers. So they are symbiotic on their consumers. It's a mutual benefit relationship. But there are times, especially sadly in our society, when political means are used. Tariffs, which block people from the freedom to buy from overseas as they would like. So they have to pay more money to a more expensive, perhaps lower quality product at home. The protected domestic industries make higher profits as a result of a tariff. But they didn't earn that higher profit. They just got it as a result of the barrier to competition. Subsidies to companies in which tax money is taken from the taxpayers and handed over to particular kinds of companies. That's a way to make more profit, but that's not an indication of value created. So I'm not in favor of that. And I want you guys to think I'm a nice man. And I don't want you to think I'm in favor of profit made any and every way, regardless of how much it tramples on people's rights. No, profit made respecting people's rights, where they have free choice in an open market, is a positive thing. To finish the slide, when there's legal plunder, people, they don't make money, they get it from somebody else. It's not a creation of wealth, but just a transfer. And in that case, we really do have a sort of a parasitism. Okay, quickly to conclude. Profit and loss are society's indispensable means of figuring out what people should do in an uncertain world. It's a necessary form of social feedback. The policy implication of that is that, as much as possible, policy should foster the profit and loss process. Don't do anything to shield companies from losses. Don't do anything to amplify their profits, because that cuts off the feedback process, which we need to get the information that's necessary to know what best to do.